Hello, Internet. My next installation of Dad's arsenal is what he called a plain Yankee rifle. I remember when he got this, and it was probably about 30 years ago. And it was a friend of his who lived in Pennsylvania. His father had passed away and left this rifle, and it was basically just a bunch of parts in a box. The trigger guard was just a strap of like galvanized steel that was like semi-nailed onto the stock. The stock was broken. There were pieces missing out of it. I don't know if it'll show up on the recording here, but Dad had to replace a whole bunch of pieces of it. It was basically destroyed. This was the original barrel for it, and you can see that the tang in the back was busted off. We believe that it was cut down too. Like Dad thought that maybe the breech blew up, or possibly maybe originally it was a flintlock, and it was modified to be a percussion rifle later on in its life. But he had always wanted to build one of these plain Yankee rifles, is what he called it. I think that was from a article in one of his American Rifleman magazines or something like that. So when he got this gun, he had, as many of the original parts as he could get, and he pieced it all back together and put the stock all back together, and he really did a beautiful job refinishing it. The gun was ready to go in the garbage. If it didn't land in Dad's hands, it would probably have gone in the trash. So I think really what he saved here was a beautiful piece of history, and I wanted to show that to people. So when he got this rifle, this was the original barrel on it, and I thought this was really interesting because he had taken a really good look at this, and there's small dashes on the barrel that's like part of the design of the barrel when it was made, and you can see that they're at the end of the barrel, and look at the sight on this little brass sight, I guess, and it's like just worn out, like it's almost like a nub. There's almost nothing left of it, really. You can see that maybe you can't see because of the camera, but it looks like this barrel was forged by hand. It was really like very crude. And the other thing is that those dashes disappear, and the barrel is actually much thinner in the middle. And I remember him talking about this as being possibly a swamped barrel. I haven't looked up that term, or if that makes any sense to anybody, but I remember him saying that years ago, is that it was a swamped barrel, or possibly it was just worn out from being handled. And I think that's really what this is. I mean, I don't know what a swamp barrel it is, but I'm going to make an assumption anyway here, just because of the ridges here are actually like worn almost flat. They're sharp on the edges. They're sharp where the stock was, but they're worn up here. So, I mean, maybe it wasn't, we were thinking that maybe it was worn just from somebody holding it in their hand and carrying it constantly. But I'm thinking maybe it was laying in the back of a wagon or on horseback, because it definitely made a big difference in the back. It's like there's quite a difference in the material that's missing out of the middle of the barrel, and it's hard to believe that it could be just worn by hand, but maybe it was, or maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe it is that swamped barrel that Dad thought it was, and it's also worn. Apparently a swamp barrel is like thinner in the middle and thicker on the ends, I guess. Maybe that was the way it was forged, or if that was like an old technique or something. I'm not very sure. But you can see that this bottom piece was soldered on, it looks like. I mean, very old and very crude. I don't know what year this rifle was made. I did do a little research into the Partridge name, which this is a backlock, I believe this is called. And it also has a beautiful patch box. This was original in the butt plate. And I believe that the lock was probably from the early 1800s to maybe the mid 1800s, 1820s, 1840s. I believe that was a British manufacturer, and they made a lot of the guns that came over to the States over here, and especially in the Northeast and to the Yankees, I guess. But I thought this was a really beautiful piece that Dad brought back to life. And I definitely wanted to showcase it early on because it really is a very cool rifle. And it's got this in the back here. That was original. This old square bolt that goes through the stock. And it really is a very nice piece. The end cap was missing, so he poured this end cap out of lead. And I think, yeah, it's got a fiberglass ramrod though. Like I said, Dad liked to shoot everything. And I remember there's a nipple in this, so I'm sure he shot it with this barrel on there and tested it out just to see how it would shoot. He probably used a very light load and gave it a try. It probably had no accuracy because I did take this out and look through the end of the barrel, and it's pretty bad. It's definitely rusty and pretty nasty inside. It was sitting up in a loft in an old barn in Pennsylvania, so it was in pretty terrible condition when Dad got it. I wish I had pictures of it. I believe this is a 50 caliber, and you can see that I'm sure Dad didn't like this barrel. First of all, I'm sure it wasn't safe to shoot. I thought it was really nice. I really liked the trigger guard that he made, and I'll show you. I'll bring this up a little bit, and I can show off the patch box. I think he made that little knob. There was a hole there, so Dad made a little knob for it. And it's funny because it's actually starting to match the brass now. And I remember when he put it on, he machined it in his little lathe, and it was actually nice and shiny and bright. But now it's starting to match. That was, like I said, probably about 35 years ago. So here's the little patch box. So I would love to hear people's opinions on this. Was this an old flintlock? What do you guys think, or ladies think? I'm very curious to get the internet's opinion on what this might be. I hope you enjoyed the third installment of Dad's Hidden Arsenal. Stay tuned.